Sorry, okay. Dr. Baidyanath Misra, there was some technical problem. And most importantly, today is the 100th birth anniversary of Professor Baidyanath Misra. So Professor Baidyanath Misra was born on 22nd November 1920. And he just passed away last year, that is on 7th May 2019. So he was born on Monday, that was 22nd November
ଗୋଟେ ସାଉଣ୍ଡ ନାହିଁ ଆସୁନି ମା କଣ କରିବ
1920 was a Monday, and he passed
ଏଇଠି
away.
ସାଉଣ୍ଡ ଆସୁନି
That was the
ପିନ କଣ
7th
ହେଇଛି
of May.
ସିଏ
Uh, I am requesting
ନାଇଁ ନାଇଁ
all
କଥା ଇଏ ହଉଛି
to please remain muted, so that we can listen everyone properly. So
ସ୍ପିକର
this is very important day for all of us, that this is we are celebrate we are basically doing this event in Baidyanath Misra on his 100th birth anniversary, and with us we have two sons of Professor Baidyanath Misra, Jayant Misra and Dr. Basan Misra. Uh, uh, so I welcome both of you.
Namaskar. Baidyanath Misra.
And I thank really both of you for joining with us. And that's how we have changed this format, that henceforth all the memorial lectures of Orissa Economic Association will be done on online platform, so that we are able to connect all the people around the globe, and we can also invite people working around the globe. So that's how this is change in format. And this endowment lecture, Professor Baidyanath Misra, when he was alive, he basically this series actually started in the year 2008 with the endowment given by Dr. Basan Misra, the son of Baidyanath Misra. Currently, he is a doctor in the Odisha Hospital, Mumbai, and I'll only give a brief introduction of Professor Baidyanath Misra, who actually basically worked from the beginning. He was the secretary, founder secretary of the association, and then he has attended all the conferences. He became the president. He edited the journal for decades, and even the last conference that he attended was Golden Jubilee Conference. So I will not talk much about Professor Baidyanath Misra, because the president of Orissa Economics Association, Professor Bhavesan, will speak in details about Professor Baidyanath Misra. And the most important thing is that in a very in fact, we took this decision to change the format very late, and so I contacted actually Professor Sudipta Sarangi to give this lecture, and I wrote to him that I understand this, and to invite to speak in this memorial lecture, which is a very important lecture, will be definitely a very short notice. And but Professor Sudipta Sarangi was very kind to us, and he immediately agreed. And in fact, he telephoned me from USA, and we had a long conversation. And so that's how we chose the topic, and then he agreed. In fact, tomorrow he has an important event. That is actually he's coming with a book that is the economics of small things, and that is being published by the Penguin publisher. And that book will be released tomorrow officially by the publisher. And of course, Professor Mitali Chinara will speak in details about the book. So I will not again speak much about the book. So I again thank Professor Sudipta Sarangi for kindly agreeing to deliver this lecture. So this will be the 13th lecture in honor of Professor Baidyanath Misra. Although the endowment was created in the year 2008, the lecture started from the year 2009. So that's how this is the 13th lecture in honor of Professor Baidyanath Misra. So I think with this, I welcome all of you. I understand we have so many former president of Orissa Economic Association who have joined with us. Also, there are many outsiders who are not also life member of the association. They have also joined with us. So I welcome all of you to to this memorial lecture. Now, with this, I invite the President of Orissa Economic Association, Professor to share his experience. Professor Bhavesh has worked with Professor Baidyanath Misra as a colleague in the Analytical and Applied Economics Department of Utkal University. So he had long association with Professor Baidyanath Misra. So he will share his memories of Professor Baidyanath Misra. And to give introduction of Professor Bhavesh, the President of Orissa Economic Association, Professor Bhavesh worked more than 30 years in the Analytical and Applied Economics Department of Utkal University without econometrics. And I am also a student of Professor Bhavesh. In fact, there are so many students in this meeting who are direct students of Professor Bhavesh. So he retired in the year 2013, and currently he is also working in Javier Institute of Management as an adjunct professor. He is teaching econometrics. So with this brief introduction about the president, I welcome Professor Bhavesh to speak about Professor Baidyanath Misra.
Thank you, Amarendra. Good evening, everybody. I welcome you to this webinar, which has been arranged in honor of Professor Baidyanath Misra to commemorate his birthday. And this we would like to observe by organizing this memorial lecture, that is the Professor Baidyanath Misra Memorial Lecture. And Amarendra has already told you, we used to have this memorial lecture during the annual conference of the association every year. And so this year we are doing it first time in the virtual mode. And so my special welcome to the family members of Professor Baidyanath Misra who have joined this webinar. His eldest. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay. His eldest son, Dr. Bashwant Misra, a renowned neurosurgeon, happened to be my classmate at Visavi College, Bhubaneswar during the pre-university class. At that time, we didn't have that +2 structure. We had the pre-university first year degree and then final BSc. So I was his classmate. So I warmly welcome him to this webinar, and also I welcome his another son, Dr. Jayanta Misra, to this webinar. We are happy to have with us Professor Sudipta Sarangi of Virginia Tech, USA, who has kindly agreed to deliver the memorial lecture at a very short notice. I welcome him. Professor Baidyanath Misra was an economist, educationist, administrator from the state of Odisha. He served as the Vice Chancellor of the Orissa University of Agriculture and Technology and Chairman of Odisha State Planning Board, Chairman of Odisha First State Finance Commission, Secretary of Odisha State Welfare Board, President of Orissa Economic Association, and the founder director and chairman of NCDS, that is Navakrishna Chaudhary Center for Development Studies. He wrote 16 books in English and 20 in Oriya. He was a columnist in several leading Odia newspaper and journals. And about his education, he received his bachelor's degree of arts in economics from Ravenshaw College, followed by master's degree from the University of Allahabad, and was the topper at both the places. He was the first Odia topper of the Faculty of Arts as well as the Department of Economics of Allahabad University. He received 2 gold medals from Sarojini Naidu during convocation, 1 each from the Arts Faculty and the Economics Department. He completed another master's degree in economics from Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, USA, on a Fulbright scholarship, where he studied under the Nobel laureate Simon Kuznets. After returning to India, he did a PhD from Utkal University. Now about his career, having started his career as a lecturer in Ravenshaw College, he moved to the Orissa University of Agriculture and Technology. He was heading the economics department there and subsequently became the Dean Agriculture. Later on, he joined Utkal University as a professor and subsequently became the head of the Department of Analytical and Applied Economics, where he instituted 2 academic chairs funded by the Reserve Bank of India and the State Bank of India. He served as the Vice Chancellor of the Orissa University of Agriculture and Technology from 1981 to 1985. During his tenure as the Vice Chancellor of OEUAT, he established the College of Engineering and Technology in Bhubaneswar, College of Agriculture at Sambalpur, College of Home Science at Bhubaneswar, and the College of Fisheries at Ganjam. He headed the Odisha State Planning Board from 1985 to 1990. In 1987, he founded the Navakrishna Chaudhary Center for Development Studies, which is jointly funded by the Indian Council of Social Science Research, Government of India, and the Government of Odisha. He was also a member of the panel of economists of the Planning Commission of India and the Odisha Pay Commission. And about he received an honorary degree from the KIT University in 2012. The Chief Minister of Odisha conferred on him with the Think Odisha Leadership Award in 2010, jointly with the Director of IIT, Damodar Acharya, for their contributions in the field of education. He was also awarded the Orissa Sahitya Academy Award in 1996 for his contribution to Oriya literature, in addition to the Nandi Ghosh Award and Vishuva Milan Award. Now about the association with Orissa Economic Association, Amarendra has already told you, and he was the founder secretary and he was the president. Then my personal association with him, I remember my association with him in the Analytical and Applied Economics Department of Utkal University. In fact, we joined the department on the same day, that was 1st September 1977. He came from OUAT. Professor Baidyanath Misra was heading the department at that time. Later on, Professor Baidyanath Misra left the department to join as the Vice Chancellor of Utkal University, handing over the mantle to Professor Baidyanath Misra. So, the department was vibrant with academic and scholarly activities during his tenure. He started the Teacher Fellowship Program of the UGC, in which about 10 teachers of different colleges of the state had joined the department to do their doctoral research. We used to have regular seminars, workshops, and other academic discussions. He instituted 2 endowment professor chairs, one from RBI and the other from SBI. During my interaction with him as a colleague in the department, I found him a good, kind-hearted human being and an able administrator. He was a very good teacher who can explain complicated and complex problems in a very lucid and simplified manner. He left the department to join OUAT as the Vice Chancellor. So this is about Dr. Professor Baidyanath Misra. Now I would request Amarendra to take over and welcome Dr. Bashanta Misra to speak few words about his father, Professor Baidyanath Misra.
Thank you, sir, for the very long and, in fact, quite justified introduction about Professor Baidyanath Misra. In fact, Professor Baidyanath Misra is a household name in the state. And I should also tell you that, in fact, many columnists will have written in newspaper that Odisha Buddhijibi Gale Kuade. That was written by the present police commissioner Sudhanshu Sarangi. So in his article, he had written a few intellectuals who actually had shaped the debate and discussion in the state, and that includes Professor Baidyanath Misra, and then other galaxy of other people like Sriram Das and other people. So that's how actually, Professor Baidyanath Misra is known as in Odisha. Now I will not actually speak much. Now I would invite. Okay, now both sons. He has three sons, as I know. I would invite Dr. Basant Misra to speak a few words about his father. Welcome, Mr.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Good morning to Professor Sarangi. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. At the outset, let me express my sincere gratitude to Odisha Economic Association for organizing this lecture in the memory of my father, Professor Baidyanath Misra. There cannot be a more proud moment for us, for me, and more for my family and my brothers and sister. Yes, you are right. We are three brothers. I am the eldest, and I have an elder sister who is in Bhubaneswar. There can be not a more proud moment for me than this, and my family than this, to have this privilege on his 100th birthday, as you said. I thank Professor Bhavesh Sen. I didn't realize that we were classmates. Thank you for reminding me that. The president of Orissa Economic Association, Dr. Amarendra Das, Secretary Orissa Economic Association, and all the EC members for making this possible. Thank you, Professor Sarangi. I think you are a Odia, so Sarangi is the right, not Sarangi, for agreeing to take time out to deliver this lecture. When Dr. Das asked me to speak for 10 minutes, I immediately agreed, but said I will speak for only 2 to 3 minutes, as once I start talking about my father, I cannot stop. Hence, if I plan for 2 minutes, I'll probably stop at 5 minutes and would not take your valuable time. My father was not only my father, he was and had always will be my hero, my mentor, my confidant, and finally my friend. He was born in 1920, probably on today. We don't know about that. He was not sure about it because those days the calendars were written afterwards. So probably on November 22nd, but we always celebrated this. And actually, we probably got greedy because we were all planning, the family was planning for his 100th birthday celebration. So he left us before that. Probably were too greedy for that. He was born to a poor priest family in a remote village in Odisha. He lost his father very early and left his home to go because he wanted to study and not continue his priest, as was the family profession. He was a man like nobody I have ever seen in my life. He was a proud man, yet not arrogant, never wasted a penny on anything, yet never went after money. He hated incompetence, but mentored the weak. He was a dreamer, yet he achieved almost everything he dreamt, almost everything, because he wanted to be a politician, which he could not. He lost the one of the elections he contested, and good for him. He was always changing the world. I dare say he changed the game of teaching, and by that, he was such a proud father. There is nobody in this world who was happier, ever happier like him when one of his children achieved something. It was almost embarrassing for us when you start talking about us. And like Dr. Das said, he is a household name in Odisha. But for your information, my friends, he was also a household name in Mumbai. I joined Hinduja Hospital, Mumbai 25 years back. I had already had a good reputation in South and North because I worked in All India Institute Delhi and then in South in one of the national institutes. So I was already a known man when I came here, but Mumbai is different. So I was an unknown entity. But anybody who was from Odisha knew me because I was Baidyanath Misra's son. So that was something which was really kind of such a proud moment for me. And he did everything. He lived a full life. Whatever he did with complete involvement. Be teaching, writing, watching an Amitabh Bachchan movie, or even a one-day cricket. We would almost every time have a long discussion about how Dhoni played or did not play any cricket game. Oh, how I miss him. How I miss him, especially the weekends, because weekdays in Mumbai are busy. So he would be waiting for my call on weekends, and we would have a long discussion almost every weekend. So every weekend is a very tough time for me. Thank you, friends, for organizing this. And over to you, Dr. Das, Dr. Sen, and Professor Sarangi's lecture. Look forward to that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for this for sharing your words about your father. And I know that for a son, there will be so many things to share. But thank you for sharing your experience. Now, I would invite Professor Mitali Chinara, who is currently working as the head of the department, Analytical and Applied Economics, Utkal University, and she's also an executive committee member of the association. She'll give the introduction of the speaker of the day, Professor Sudipta Sarangi. So I invite Professor Mitali Chinara to give the introduction about Professor Sarangi.
Samastanku namaskar. Thank you, the Secretary Amarendra, for giving me this opportunity. The President of the Association, all the dignitaries present here, the family members of Professor Misra. I start this whatever I have to say with my deep sense of Shraddhanjali to Professor Baidyanath Misra. I have not worked with, I didn't have the opportunity to work with him, but because by the time I joined the university, he had already superannuated. But in every occasion, whenever we organized any function, we used to invite him, and had several opportunities of interacting with him. And the day he passed away was a day on which it will be finely etched in my memory, because when his body was brought to the university, there are very few people, because it was post funny days. And he is a person who will be deeply remembered by everyone. Now, coming to business, I have been given the opportunity, the responsibility of introducing the speaker of the day, Professor Sudipta Sarangi. Sudipta Sarangi at present is the professor and a department head in Virginia Tech, Virginia. And he has been, before that, if you look at the professional experience of Sudipta Sarangi, it is quite extensive. He has been I will just mention a few. He has been the program director, Economics National Science Foundation. He has been the assistant, associate, and professor of Louisiana State University of Louisiana. He has been a fellow of Global Labor Organization, a research professor of DIW Berlin, an associate researcher of institute in France. He has been a visiting scholar and visiting professor to several universities across the globe. This is just a few of his professional experience. Now, if I come to the education Professor Sarangi had, he earned his bachelor's degree from University of Delhi in 1991. He earned his MA Economics from Delhi School of Economics in 93, and another MA in Economics from the Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University in 1997. He earned his PhD from the same institute in the year 2000. Professor Sarangi's field of interest includes applied game theory, experiments, and development economics. A few words about the several and multitude of awards and grants that Professor Sarangi received. I will mention once again a very few, because the list is very long. 2020, he received Kuznets Prize for the best paper from in the Journal of Population Economics. He received the Alumni Award for Excellence in International Research from Virginia Tech in 2019. The LSU Distinguished Faculty Award in 2013. From the same institute, he got the Teaching Enhancement Fund in 2012, the Visiting Scholar Fellowship Behavioral Business Research Lab from University of Arkansas in 2012, and many more. He has been adjudged as the best teacher award, undergraduate category in Department of Economics in Louisiana State University, and many more, many more. And this also includes the merit scholarship from Delhi School. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not, Professor Sarangi will excuse me, because if I go on talking about him, there will be no time left for the lecture. He also, coming back to India, he earned the merit scholarship from Delhi School of Economics, and also the National Talent Scholarship of the NCERT, the prestigious national of the NCERT from the years 1986 to 91. Professor Sarangi has several papers, book chapters, popular blogs to his credit, a huge number of presentations to his credit as well. He has been the principal investigator and the co-principal investigators of many funded research programs. Besides that, he has handled several editorial responsibilities, and he has been a member of academic societies of several global academic societies of repute. Now, I shall come to a very interesting part about the books. Before I come to the most important book, which is going to have a virtual lunch tomorrow, I would like to take the name of another book which is in progress, The Political Economy of Corruption, Emerging Issues, which will be published in 2021 by the Routledge. The co-editors are Chandan Jha and Ajit Misra. Now, coming to the most important thing and the most interesting thing as well, he is the author of a very important book which has been brought out by Penguin India, The Economics of Small Things. To mention an event, the book will be launched virtually as a joint event between the IIT Mumbai and the publishers Penguin India. The book launch event will be a conversation between Professor Sarangi, Professor Kaushik Basu, and Professor Narayanan from IIT Mumbai tomorrow, that is November 23rd at 9 a.m. in Zoom platform. Now, I would like to take a few minutes of your time to speak about the book, Economics of Small Things. Now, why I want to speak about the book? Because the current lecture, I think, if I'm not wrong, is a part of the book. So, Economics of Small Things approaches economics, and in particular economic theory, by identifying it in the little things around us, in the ordinary as well as in the quickie aspect of everyday life. This book promises to be different. It is different. It sets itself apart right from the introduction, which begins with a timeline of events like in a Frederick Forsyth thriller. But these are daily events in the life of ordinary Indians, like having the morning cup of tea, and going to the office, commuting, and what happens at lunch, and all those things. Believe me, there is economics in all of that. Now, there are a few things I would like to say. If you take up questions like, why are all good mangoes exported from India? Why should we pay our household help more? Why do you hesitate to reach out for that last piece of cake in a gathering? Are more choices really better? This is what we're going to discuss today. Why do many of us offer a prayer but are reluctant to wear a seatbelt while driving? Are Indians hardwired to get grumpy at a peer's success? What's common between a box of cereal and your resume? Can economics answer all these questions and more? According to Dr. Sarangi, the answer is a clear-cut, unambiguous yes. Unlike other popular books on economics, The Economics of Small Things has a distinctly Indian flavor. For example, in chapter 1, it explores the unholy trinity of asymmetric information, that is adverse selection, moral hazard, and costly auditing, but in the context of the Grameen Bank and joint liability lending. Then the book explains why the village Muhammad Yunus, the village Shahukar, and Munimji all succeed while the formal banking sector did not. The book delves into many other such Indian themes like Chappal Chori at temples, the T20, the one-day internationals, and what is the best strategy for shoe shopping. It has 25 chapters that covers the entire gamut from A to Z. Generally, depending on your level of exposure, economics is either considered expansive and somewhat too complicated or too heavy or filled with indecipherable Greek letters and numbers. The Economics of Small Things provides a surprising departure from this. It is written in an easy style with a dash of humor, and that almost seems counterintuitive to economic theory. This only goes to show that economics can be funny and interesting too. It will appeal not only to the high school students and their teachers, but also to the corporate executives, actually anyone who is curious. The refreshing, light-hearted style makes it an easy read. The chapters are big on ideas, short in size, but to be enjoyed like a delicious petit four. The concluding chapter provides a set of 6 takeaways. For example, it says that cognitive costs matter, which is why people use heuristics. It is also one reason why we stereotype people. Another takeaway is that heterogeneity also matters, an idea that is not strange to Indians given our wide diversity. But the point really is that since people like different things, like prefer different levels of comfort in their airplane or train travels, like different flavors of masala oats, or like a professor and a student have a different value for time, it gives firms an opportunity to sell different products at different prices, thereby making higher profits. Summing it all up, the economics of small things says, to quote, economics matters, and it matters not only in the abstract, but it matters in the little things in our personal life and for great many of our social interaction. Now, Arvind Subramanian, I don't have to say who is he. He was the Indian economist and former chief economic advisor to Government of India. He calls it the book. He says that he uses 3 words to describe the book. It's that it is daring, illuminating, and entertaining. And the book has a foreword by none other than Professor Kaushik Basu of Cornell University. With these words, I leave the forum now to Dr. Sarangi, who I'm sure will excuse me for all the omissions, because if I talk about him in detail, I don't think there will be any time left for the lecture. Thank you so much. Over to Professor Sudipta Sarangi.
Thank you, Mitali. Thank you. That is a very generous introduction. And when Amarendra actually made the email pathaitla, I was very happy because this is a rare privilege and a rare honor. As you all heard, when Professor Baidyanath Misra's contributions, not just to economics, but to the economic infrastructure of the state, as well as to literature and other things, plus the legacy of students, is enormous. So I think it's a rare honor and a privilege. Future I will be able to attend the Odisha Economic Association meeting in person. Lecture to the virtual hub, so that is very good. So so thank you, Amarendra, for inviting me. And Mitali, that was a very generous introduction, and you said lots of nice things about the book. So thank you very much. I see a lot of people I know here. I see Professor Pulin Naik, who taught me at Delhi School of Economics. Of course, Amarendra, Mitali Madam, and I think Rasananda is here. My brother is, who is also a colleague of Rasananda, is here. So I see all of these people. So Keshav Babu is also here. So yes. So thank you all. Let me try to share screen now and get started. I know it's Sunday evening, so I will try to make sure that the presentation is, something that people can listen to and also enjoy. Now, let's see. Okay. You should be. Can you see the screen?
Yeah, it's coming. It's coming.
Okay.
No, you share the screen. You have to share one window.
I am trying to do that. Can you see? Yes, you should be able to see the screen now. Yes, Amarendra, can you all see the screen? Yes.
You probably chose the wrong one. What you have to do is you escape that again. Stop the presentation, and again you select.
Wait a second.
Present a window. There are 3 options.
No, you first open the PPT.
It is there. It is there. It is there. It is there. Okay, let's see. It should. No.
Someone else is trying to present. Yeah, coming.
What happened?
I think he has logged out.
I think so.
You log in, just a minute.
Yeah, okay. So present now, and then select share a window, and then you select that PPT. Now you are mute also, you have to unmute.
Okay, and yeah, it should start sharing.
It
Yes.
is starting, just a minute. No, your screen is coming. The PowerPoint
No,
is
I
not
think
coming.
I must do. No, Amarendra, I have to do stop present. I have to do let me do it. Okay, I know how to do this. Okay, so because we already did this earlier. Okay. Okay.
Actually, your screen is being visible. Now, PowerPoint is not coming.
Yeah. I see that.
You open the PowerPoint.
Yeah, it's
Click on
open. The
that.
PowerPoint is the PowerPoint is open.
Yeah, it has come. It has come. It has come.
It has come.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Just make it full screen.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Are we
clear.
there?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
very good.
it's
Yeah.
perfect.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Now.
Yeah. So thank you. So this is the talk. The title of the talk is "Are More Choices Better?" and Other Tales About Decision Making. Given that we have 45 minutes, I will not talk much about the other tales of decision making. This is actually a summary of 5 research papers, 2 of which have been published in Review of Economics and Statistics, 1 in the Southern Economics Journal, 1 in Journal of Economic Behavior and Organization, and 1 in Decision Analysis. So with that, I will start the formal talk, and please feel free to, actually we'll keep questions till the end because we have 45 minutes. I need to tell you that this grant was funded with an NIH grant, and of course the opinions expressed here have nothing to do with NIH. These are personal opinions. Okay, so I mean, in some ways you can say, what is all the fuss about? As economists, we know that more is better, right? This is captured in the assumption of monotonicity in the utility function. So we say preferences satisfy this assumption of monotonicity, or sometimes a weaker version called local non-satiation. But the idea is very clear. More is better. So what are we talking about here? Well, it's not that simple. More is not always better, because you can easily think of a situation where more does not work very well. Okay? But just to be sure, I want to make people understand that this talk is not about whether more is better or not. The question is really whether more choices are better. Okay? So the fact that I have more things from which I can choose, is that a good idea or not? That's what we want to focus on. And what's the framework in which we want to see this decision? In general, you can go back to the old definitions of economics, which talks about scarcity, unlimited wants, limited resources. In general, we cannot have everything we want. So that's the typical dilemma of the economist. And that's why all these issues are about decision making. In some sense, if you forget the old definitions of economics, the modern definitions of economics really say it is about how people make decisions. And so our lives are full of decisions which shape our lives. And we want to understand different aspects of decision making. And this is kind of what I'm going to do here. And of course, in recent years, there has been the rise of behavioral economics. And so there will be elements of behavioral economics in this talk. Okay? Just to give you an idea, how many decisions does an average person in the US make on a given day? And this is not conscious decision necessarily. This is the number of decisions your brain makes in a given day. And according to psychologists, that is 35,000 decisions. That's what your brain is doing every day. Okay. So just to give you a sense, if you want to buy orange juice and you walk into a store in the US, this is what you will see. And you have to decide which type of orange juice you want to buy. Or if you walk into a small store, this is what you will see, right? This is the array of products you will see. And then your brain has to look at this information, process this information, analyze it, make decisions. Okay. So obviously, these are not very easy things to do. But I mean, this is one thing. But really, what we want to focus on is important decisions in life. And I will argue that these decisions are made from a large number of choices. For example, which one do you want to eat? This is the range. Or if you go to the other side of the buffet, maybe this is what you have. Or I want to explain, this is a really fascinating dish because it is a dish where the inside is cheese, baked inside semia, there is melted cheese, and then you pour honey on top. Okay? And it comes out hot. I can tell you it's extremely tasty. It is called kunefe. It's a Middle Eastern dessert. But the question is, if you have all these things, what do you do? After all, you can't eat everything. So these are decisions you have to make, right? And as we said, we want to study important decisions, and we want to study the role we want to study is choice, right? Not the fact that we make decisions. What is the role in these decisions played by the fact that you have choice? Okay. The issue, why this is an important issue? This is an important issue because economists believe that additional options can never be detrimental, right? And where does this come from? This comes from the fact that the unconstrained maximum, right, can never be worse than the constrained maximum. So if you go back to the idea of indifference curves, right, the highest indifference curve you reach, if I'm thinking about that, the highest indifference curve, the utility maximizing point on the highest indifference curve can never be worse than the utility maximizing point that is on the budget line, right? So if I forget this point, this has to be at least as good as the one you can reach on the unconstrained maximization, okay? However, we ignore the idea that there can be costs. Okay? In other words, decision-making itself can be costly, right? So if I'm buying medicine, if I have to buy just one brand in the store, it's not very difficult. If I have 6 brands, that is another issue. But if I have a whole rack or a whole shelf of Sudafed, that's a whole different problem. So economists will argue that, this is a great thing to have a lot of range in which type of Sudafed you want to buy. But for the brain, it's not so easy. To illustrate the crux of this talk, let me just give you a very simple example, okay? Suppose you have to choose what you want to eat tonight from a menu. On one hand, we can call this the basic menu, no choice. It's your mother's menu. Whatever she makes, you will eat. You don't have a choice. Or if you have stayed any time in a hostel in India, this is kind of what you will get, right? There is no choice. It's at most, you will have a veg option and a non-veg option. But really, there is no choice. Okay. Option 2, you can go to the other extreme. You can have a 3-volume book of menu. And by the time you are done with this menu, the night is over. Maybe the restaurant will close down before you can choose your dish. So really, this is also not a very useful option. Okay. So instead, what would you think if you had a menu like this? It's not extremely long. It's not extremely small. Right? It's not like there is no choice at all. There is a choice. Okay? So clearly, already you can figure out that option 1 is maybe not the best idea. Option 3 is also not the best idea. Option 2 is also not the best idea. Option 3 is possibly a reasonable idea. But is that all there is? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through this type of problem using an approach called experimental economics, which actually the first experiment is supposed to have been done by Chamberlain. And he's famous for his work on monopolistic competition. So Chamberlain did the first experiment in Harvard, and Vernon Smith, who got the Nobel Prize for experimental economics, did not like the results of Chamberlain's experiment. He replicated it, and since then several people have got the Nobel Prize for experimental economics. So I'm going to introduce the experimental economics methodology. Okay, but yeah, you will say that till now I have been talking about food. So it's really time to get serious now. I wanted to put Amarendra's face there, But I said, Amarendra doesn't look scary no matter what we do. So then I had to think about whose face to put. And I thought, okay, maybe everyone knows Gabbar. So if we don't get serious now, Gabbar will come and get us. That's the idea. Okay. So going back, many important decisions are made from a large number of options. And now I want to talk about what these important decisions are on which I want to focus. One idea could be health insurance. One idea could be prescription drug coverage. So this is if you buy some kind of prescription medicine, then maybe you can buy insurance to pay for this medicine, right? So that is prescription drug coverage. Retirement investment, right? So what are you going to do with the money you save? You can leave it in the bank in a fixed deposit, in which case it will earn a certain amount of interest, which might be barely over inflation rate, maybe less than inflation rate also. On the other hand, you can invest it in a portfolio. So the question is, what kind of portfolio do you want to invest it in? Okay? And is it good to have too much choice? So let me focus exactly on something called Medicare Part D. I will explain in a minute what is Medicare Part D. And the reason we focus on Medicare Part D is because right about the time when we first started doing this research, Medicare Part D was a big issue in the US. Okay, so what to do with Medicare Part D was the question. So what is Medicare Part D? Private insurers, that is people you buy your health insurance from, offer insurance regarding prescription drug plans, but it doesn't cover everything. So Medicare Part D is some additional option insurance that you can buy to pay for the cost of medicines. That's the basic idea. That is what Medicare Part D does. Okay. Now, the crazy thing, or the absolutely unfathomable thing, according to me, is that depending on where you live, you will see a wide range of options. So if you live in the state of Arkansas, just for Medicare Part D, it was offering 95 plans. In Louisiana, it was 75 plans. Okay, so I mean, it's just a very simple additional insurance, but there's a bewildering array of plans offered to individuals. Now, imagine that Medicare Part D is an option only available to senior citizens. So this is already a senior citizen, and this person now has to negotiate through at minimum 75 plans, because the lowest number of plans that I'm listing here is 75. You have to negotiate through 75 plans to come up with a decision to buy insurance for additional coverage for medicine insurance. That's the kind of thing we want to talk about. Okay, and so the real question is, how do you select the optimal plan? There's a very famous quote by a psychologist called Barry Schwartz, who has written a popular book called The Paradox of Choice. And Barry Schwartz argues that having the opportunity to choose is not a blessing if we do not have the wherewithal to make wise choices. In other words, choice is good, but if you don't know, or if you don't have the ability to make good choices, then it doesn't matter if you have too much choice. So in fact, the book starts with a story of when he goes to a clothing store to buy a pair of jeans. And he says, I had not been to a clothing store to buy a pair of jeans in a long time. When I go and I said, okay, I want a regular jeans, I'm given 15 different choices. Do you want stone wash? Do you want acid wash? Do you want, this type of waist? Do you want that type of length? Do you want that type of color? He says, this is just too confusing. I just want a regular blue jeans, right? Very difficult. Similarly, when I first came to the US in 1994, this is around the time Soviet Union had collapsed. And there were a lot of people from these former Soviet republics, and they had never seen so much choice in the grocery store. And I still remember I had classmates who would go to the grocery store, and if you go to the grocery store in the United States, there may be 50 different types of bread. And it's true for us also. First time I went to Subway, and you say, okay, I want a sandwich. And the guy says, do you want this on your sandwich, that on your sandwich? And I'm thinking, I just want food. I'm hungry. Why do I have to make 15 decisions before I can get food? Okay? So these people, sometimes I have stories of people who would go and they would come back without buying bread because they could not decide which is the bread they want to buy. They'd never encountered so much choice. Okay? So the crucial issue is understanding the wherewithal. Okay? And then, of course, what I want to focus on today, which is things that we need to understand, is, does age matter? Does gender matter? Does education matter? In other words, is everybody equally good at making these types of decisions? What about group decisions? If I put people in a group, will that help? Can people make better choices without having fewer choices, right? So if we conclude that fewer choices are better, then the question is, how do we get rid of choices? That would be very paternalistic. So if we let them have all the choice, can we design a choice architecture that people can use to make better choices? But here's the other troubling question. Do people know which choice architecture is good for them? Now, of course, I am not going to cover all of this. I will cover the first one and hopefully the second one. Okay? So today's agenda is this for sure, and maybe something else. So let me quickly mention some limitations of earlier studies. So a lot of these types of studies have been done by psychologists, and what psychologists measure is satisfaction with choice, or in fact, whether a choice was made. Like I was telling you, my friends from former Soviet republics would sometimes not be able to make a choice. And this is something psychologists encounter, that if you give people too many choice, there is choice paralysis. People are unable to make a decision. They postpone the decision to a future date. The other thing people in psychology look at is whether people are happy with the choice or not. And then if you have been to a restaurant, you always know the idea of grass is greener on the other side. You order something, and then you look over the next table, the other person is eating something else, and you always feel, well, that choice, that I should have ordered that dish. That looks better than what I have ordered. So there is that element. But that's not what we want to focus on. What we want to focus on is, did you make a good choice? Did you make the correct choice for you? Okay. So you realize that all these examples that I'm giving you, there's an element of subjectivity. So the dish that is best for you, or the dish that is to your taste in a restaurant, may not be to my taste, right? So somebody might like matar paneer, somebody might like butter chicken, right? So these are not comparable. So in that sense, we have to think of a framework where we can create an optimal choice that is best for everyone, and then study whether people make the optimal choices or not. That's one issue. Now, there have been studies in the field, okay, of optimal choices, in particular of optimal choices using healthcare data, Medicare prescription D plans. And this involves Daniel McFadden's work also, who got the Nobel Prize for discrete choice modeling. But the issue there, or the issue in this work, is that we don't observe what people are choosing over. What do we observe in the economy? Just like in the demand estimation, you don't observe the entire demand curve. You observe the point that we picked. So similarly, in these cases, when people choose a Medicare prescription D plan, we know what they chose. We don't know what else they looked at and how they came to that decision. So what we want to do is actually, we want to be able to understand the choice process. Okay. So we want to have a sense of what people looked at and what they chose. Amarendra, am I audible, and is this clear?
Yeah, it's going perfect.
Okay, thank you. So the idea we're going to use to deal with this is experimental economics. So what is an experiment? What is the typical experimental economics idea? First, let's be very clear. Unlike psychology, economics experiments do not use deception, right? So, and Human Subjects Review Board has to be cleared. Of course, everything has to be cleared by Human Subjects Review Board, since the Milgram experiments that took place in Harvard in the 50s, where people were given electric shock, false electric shock, was given to actors who pretended to be hurt, and that is deception. We do not use that kind of deception. The other thing we want to do is we want to look at economic phenomena that drives behavior. So we do not present the context. So for example, if I want to study road rage, if I want to study something like prescription drug plan coverage, we will, or insurance choice, we will not use the words insurance. Okay, because we will strip the problem down to its basic economic motives and study choice in that context. There are a few exceptions. Usually when people study corruption, they talk about bribes in the experiment. So barring things like corruption, most of the times we do not use context in an economics experiment. We do not use deception. Now, another very important thing is incentivizing people. So economics experiments usually involve paying subjects, but this is very different from paying subjects that we do in a survey. So for example, what happens in a survey? In a survey, you say, okay, you fill out the survey, you will get whatever, 100 rupees if you fill out this survey, or you will get a gift coupon or to something. But in economics experiments, what is done is the subjects are incentivized, which means that what they will get depends exactly on the decisions they make. So if you make bad decisions, you will end up with less money. If you make good decisions, you will end up with more money. So there's a strong incentive to see if incentives will matter and if they will capture the phenomenon, and then we can understand what is driving behavior. Okay, so these are some of the key tenets that drive experimental research. Actually, in 1993, Vernon Smith published a paper in the American Economic Review called Induced Value Theory, and there he underlies the basic philosophy of experimental economics, and these points are used there. Okay, so what's the nature of the experimental task? And I will say this in maybe somewhat formal language, but I will show you pictorially what this means, and then you will see easily what all this means. So in some sense, there exist unknown future states of nature. Okay, so there's a state of nature which right now is unknown to you. Ex ante, you do not know. You know the probability associated with each of these states, but the realization of the state will happen in the future. There are things called options, and options will cover some states, but not others. And what is your decision problem? Your decision problem is to pick option, which is basically maximization over the states. Okay. Now, some experimental simplifications. At the end of the day, exactly one state is realized. You will see the meaning of all of these in the next slide, so please don't worry if you're not fully with me at this point. There is no cost of options. In other words, what we wanted to do is, since we want to study insurance plans, we decided that apart from the choice side of the insurance plan, whether more choices are good or bad, if we have a cost of insurance plan, then in the experimental setup, it's going to be very hard to filter the results that are driven by the choice part and by the cost part. So what we decided to do, let's assume that all plans cost the same, that is cost of 0. So in our case, the different insurance plans we will show people have no cost. Of course, in reality, that's not the case. Different insurance plans have different costs, but we are not interested in the cost. If people are going to use cost for filtering, that is a different problem. We just want to see how people make decisions when faced with an array of choices in this case, okay? And how is payment realized? If you choose an option, and then the state, and then a state is drawn, if that state occurs, then you receive payment, otherwise you don't. Okay, so let me show you what happens. So these are there are 6 cards here. These are the unknown states of nature, okay? The odds column right here is the probabilities associated with the unknown states of nature. Okay? The options on the top, you may think of these options as insurance plans, okay? So you can think of the cards or the states of nature as illnesses and their associated probabilities. The options you can think of as insurance plans, and then your job is to choose an insurance plan to buy. Okay. So if you go over the numbers here, you will see that this one adds up to, in expected terms, this one is basically 24 plus 26. So 24 plus 26 plus 21, right? So this is 71. This actually has the highest expected payoff. If you don't know the state of which state of nature will be realized, you're making this decision ex ante, then any kind of analysis says that, remember we said only one state is drawn, so there is no risk issues. Any kind of analysis will tell you that that's the plan to choose. So suppose you selected option C, and then nature randomly draws a card. That is, some state of nature is realized, some disease happens maybe. And the way the subjects will get paid in this experiment is if the plan they have chosen or the option they have chosen is drawn. So suppose you chose card C, or suppose you chose option C. Card 2 is drawn, then you will not get paid. You will get paid if either card 1 or card 3 or card 4 are drawn. No payment if card 5 is drawn, card 6 is drawn, or card 2 is drawn. Okay. If you had chosen option B, then no payment if card 1 is drawn and card 4 is drawn. In all other cases, you would get paid. So it's very simple. What would you do? You would just add up the numbers for each checked column, right? So 24 plus 21 plus 12 plus 9. So that is 66. And so on. You can do this, and it will turn out that option C is the best choice. That's all you have to do in this experiment. Okay, you would think this is a very easy choice. Now, what's the experimental design? The experimental design was what we call a 2 by 2 by 2 within subject design. Means the same person is making decisions. It's 2 by 2 by 2. there is number of states that we consider, that is the number of cards will either be 6 or 10. The number of options will go from 4. So in one task, you will see 4 options. In another task, you will see 18 options. So these are all the 2 by 2. And then the last 2 is, in one case, PDF will be the probability distribution that for the cards that we use will be fairly similar, and in the other one is fairly extreme. So the idea that this captures is that sometimes if I have a lot of similar things to choose from, okay, it's very hard to make a choice. On the other hand, if I have a lot of different things to choose from, it's easier to make the choice. So suppose you want to get your house painted, and I give you a choice of colors that are very similar to yellow. I give you a choice of 10 different colors that are very similar to yellow. On the other hand, the other choice is maybe I give you 3 or 4 options, or maybe same number of options, but the colors are all very different. So blue, green, red, yellow. I don't give you many shades of yellow. So people will argue that in this case, the extreme one, which is many different colors, is easier to choose from. Okay, that's the idea. So as you can see, 2 variations here, 2 variations here, 2 variations here. So it's a 2 by 2 by 2 within subject design. That means each individual will make 8 decisions. Okay, and each of these 8 decisions will vary along these parameters. That's what's called a 2 by 2 by 2 design. And then what we wanted to do is when we get to 10 cards from 6 cards, we maintain parity. So to be comparable between the 6 and the 10, when we expand from 6 to 10, if a certain option covered a particular state, then the expansion will also make sure that that state is expanded in the appropriate way, and those are covered. Okay, so suppose I had something that suppose this was no, I don't want to do A B is confusing. Let's say card 1 and card 2. Okay, and card 1 was covered in the 6th state by 15. If I expand, when I go to card 10, I will make sure that if I break C1 into C1 prime and C1 double prime, it will add up to 15. Okay, so this type of expansion is done so that comparisons are possible. I've explained the other ideas of the probability distribution, right? And in this case, when we move from 4 to 13 options, the new option is always easier to find. So that's the idea. Okay, so I already told you what a sample task. This is what subjects will see on the screen, and all they have to do is choose an option. After they choose the option, by the way, this is this is one of the easier tasks because this is 6 by 4. This is the most complex task. This is 10 by 13. Okay, so this was the most complex task. It's a matrix of 10 by 13. But again, all you have to do is add up the numbers, and there is no time limit. There is no time pressure. You can take your time to do it. The task itself is not very difficult. So once you make a choice, then this shows you the probability of the cards. So that means there were 21 cards of type 1. There were 9 cards of type 2, and so on. So you will see this on your screen. You can choose to shuffle it. This card will shuffle. Then you can pick one. Okay. So for example, you revealed 1. Then it showed that nature drew card 1. Okay. Now you will check if your plan has card 1 or not. If you have card 1, you will get paid. Otherwise, you will not. That's the idea. And then you can click reveal cards to see that the deck has not been altered in any way. Okay, so before I proceed, is everyone clear about the setup of the experiment? Because if you don't understand the setup of the experiment, the results will not make any sense. Amarendra, if you have a clarifying question, I will take one from you only, not from everybody else, because I can't do it. If there is something I missed, I will explain it now before I move on.
No, things are going well. I think we can continue. Yeah.
Okay, so it's very clear. You see a matrix on your screen of cards and options. There is always one best plan. So now understand that we have taken out subjectivity. Okay. Also, because only one state is drawn, there is no portfolio choice problem here. So risk aversion does not enter the picture. If I was drawing multiple states, then it will become a portfolio allocation problem. I have to worry about people's risk attitudes. So there is no risk attitude to worry about. Everybody has the same best option because they all see the same problems. Okay. And once you select, so it's like you have 4 insurance plans. You select your insurance plan, then you get a disease. If your insurance plan covers the disease, then you are fine. If it doesn't, then you don't get paid. That's the idea. Very simple. Okay. Now, in the experiment, because it's computerized, and people who do econometric work will know that there can be order effects. So the order in which I see things can actually affect my decisions. So every subject sees a random order of decision problems, random order of options, random order of attributes. So in other words, what is plan A for you may not be plan A for me. It will be the same 4 plans, but the numbering and their position on the screen will differ for you and me. 127 subjects were recruited through Vanderbilt University's marketing lab, which is called E-Lab. Subjects were paid for every correct choice. They were paid $1, and they were also paid $3 for participation. So what E-Lab does, it's an online platform, which means that we give them the sampling strategy of what type of people we want to draw. So we wanted the US, we wanted a sample that was representative of the US population, except for one caveat. We wanted to make sure that the older age groups had better education, simply because this was an online experiment. We did not want people to have problems with online experiments. So we oversampled the elderly for more education. Other than that, it was stratified to follow US population. So they will send out, in a huge database of 80,000 people, they send out invitations. Once enough responses come in and our stratified sampling is done, we stop. So we stopped at 127 subjects. Each subject, remember, made 8 decisions. So the total number of decisions is that. Okay, so 1096. What other information? We had information on age, sex, and education. What was the question of interest? The question of interest was frequency of optimal choice. Okay. Now, if I look at optimal choice across the entire population, it is very interesting. Even in this simple problem, you find that only 40% of the choices are optimal. Okay? Interestingly, when you have only 4 insurance plans to choose from, it goes up to 47. But when you have 13, it goes down to 35%. Okay. The crucial thing you will notice, however, is the thing by age. So it turns out that people in the age group 18 to 40 make the best decisions. People in the age group 41 to 60 are okay, but people in the age group over 60 make dramatically worse. And this is statistically significantly different from everything else. So this age group makes really poor decisions. Okay. And this is not something we had expected. We also looked at the idea of nearly optimal decisions. That is, you are within 10% of the optimal choice. Again, we find the same pattern is maintained. Okay. So in some sense, there is this expression in English called it's all downhill after 40. And this kind of captures that expression. Interestingly, there is no difference in gender performance, right? You see that the men and women are equally capable at making these decisions, or incapable at making these decisions. Okay. Now, then, of course, we didn't want to stop there. We wanted to ask, why do we observe this difference across age? Could it be because of education? And the answer is no, because we already oversampled the elderly to be including more educated people. You could argue that, well, is there a variation in the time spent on decision making? And we have information on this because the computer clocks how long you took to make each decision. There is no difference in this either. Then you could argue, well, maybe the elderly people that are participating in our experiment are rich retired people and they don't care about our experiment, so they just make random decisions. That's why we see that they're not doing very well. So we have 2 answers to this. So first I will argue that when people play Sudoku, if nobody is forcing them to play Sudoku, they generally try to win. They're not trying to lose. Now, we didn't ask these people, we didn't put a gun on their head and say, you have to participate in our experiment. They chose to do it voluntarily. Therefore, I would argue that they're not trying to lose or do things poorly. But just to be on the safe side, we said, okay, let's do another experiment, bring in some new people. And now for every successful task, we pay them 10 times what we were paying in the original experiment. So if you get it correct, instead of $1, we give you $10. No difference in the responses. Okay. So then the final explanation we could try to explore is the idea that maybe people are analyzing these problems differently. Okay. These people are following different decision rules. So we decided to explore, based on the data, we decided to explore 4 heuristics. Okay. Let me explain these 4 heuristics. So this one everybody knows. This is the one that we would expect people to follow. This is expected payoff maximization. Dominance. Dominance is the idea that if there is an insurance plan that covers fewer things than another insurance plan, right? So suppose insurance plan A covers everything that insurance plan B covers and more, then insurance plan B is dominated, and it would be stupid to use insurance plan B. Okay, so we checked for dominance. Then you could think about lexicographic ordering. So imagine that there is an insurance plan which covers the highest state, okay? So the state that has the highest probability, and you say, okay, I'm only going to look, because I only care about this. So just like lexicographic preferences. So let's say that I only care about hypertension. So I'm only going to focus on, and I think hypertension is, for me, given my genetics, I have very high probability of getting hypertension. So I will only focus on insurance plans that provide good coverage on hypertension and nothing else. Okay, and I will choose from that subset. That's lexicographic. Then tallying is the idea that you ignore the probability information of the diseases given to you. You impute your own probability information, your own probability distribution over them, and then make that choice. So let me show you what this means in this case, right? So suppose you were doing tallying. We already saw that. You would select this. Now, in this sheet, there is no insurance plan which is dominated by any other insurance plans. In other words, there does not exist an insurance plan that is a superset of another insurance plan. So neither A, B, C, or D satisfy the superset criteria. Then if I was looking at lexicographic, so lexicographic would say that I will never choose between plans A and B. I will restrict attention to plans C and D. Okay. What would tallying say? Tallying would say, forget this. In tallying, you will say every plan has probability 1/6. Okay. Every card has probability 1/6. In that case, what would you select? You would say, okay, C provides 3/6. Okay. D provides 3/6. B provides 4/6. 4/6. This is the coverage provided by A and B. Because everything is equally likely, you have completely ignored this information. You don't care about this. You have done this. So you would choose either something from between A and B. You would never choose C and D. Although expected utility maximization would say you choose C. Okay. So this is something that Richard Thaler, the Nobel Prize winner, has uncovered in some other research also. When they look at actual insurance plan choices, retirement plan choices, they find that even economists and finance professors, if they have to allocate their portfolio, they will split it equally between safe and risky stocks without worrying about the return. That's exactly what this is doing. You split your money equally. If I give you 10 different stocks to choose, you don't look at returns. You say, okay, I'm not going to worry. I'm going to split my money equally on 10 different stocks. So many people who are even educated on risk theory tend to do this. So this is the tallying heuristic. Okay, so what do we find? Interestingly, the payoff heuristic, which is expected payoff maximization or expected utility maximization, is only used by the young people, that is people in the age group 18 to 40. Dominance is, there is very little evidence for dominance. Young people use it. Lexicographic also the same thing. Tallying, seniors, the only heuristic that seniors use is tallying. Okay. In other words, what seniors are doing, to give you an extreme example, suppose there is an insurance plan that will cover 50 obscure diseases and another insurance plan that will cover the 10 most frequent diseases. A senior citizen in this experiment is going to choose the one that covers 50 obscure diseases instead of the one that will cover the 10 most common diseases, because they're following the 1/n heuristic. Okay. So you could say, really, how can we be sure? Okay. To be sure, what we did a second experiment. So we brought in new people into the lab. We set up plans like this. If you look at this one, the optimal plan here is 3/6, right? So according to our prediction, a senior citizen would never choose this. Okay? So in other words, we set up something like this, which is a trap. So the optimal plan would cover fewer states than a suboptimal plan. And we want to see if the senior citizens walk into this trap. That is, they select a suboptimal plan simply because it covers more states of the world. So we redo the experiment by bringing in just people in the 18 to 40 age group and people in the 60 plus age group. It turns out that senior citizens actually do fall into the trap. Okay, so our estimated heuristics in this experiment predict what behavior we expect to find very well. So we take the old data, we predict what people would do in the new experiment, and we bring in people, create the new experiment, see what they do in the new experiment. Our predictions are very good. Okay, of course, observed behavior is better than predicted, possibly because these people are doing it the second time. The young, again, even in this second round, outperform the old. Okay. Older subjects are exploited, younger subjects are difficult to exploit. Then we followed this up with another paper where we simply looked at age, where we say, okay, forget about the young people and middle age, let's just focus on people over 60. So what we did is we brought in people over age group 60 and broke them up into 3 groups, age 60 to 67, 68 to 74, 74 plus. It was interesting because, again, there is no gender effect with aging. But the first 2 groups seem to be using heuristics. The third group is totally random choice. And guess who is also 74 years old? So 74 plus is totally random choice. Another person who at this point is 74 is here. So what this tells you, or in other words, the story that or the message here is that if you have to make important decisions in life, try to make them before you're 74. Of course, there is a caveat. If you have higher education, college, at least undergraduate college education, that is at least a bachelor's degree or higher, then this decline in performance with age is not there. It is there a little bit, but the trend is arrested. Okay. So we also, in this experiment with old people, we also tested a bunch of socioeconomic characteristics. So people's education, their income, their parental income. We gave them math problems to see maybe this is driven by people's familiarity with mathematics. We also did CRT tests. CRT tests are cognitive reflection tests. As an understanding of risk, we looked at their smoking behavior. Nothing changes. The only thing it turns out that matters is whether these people play cards or gamble. And of course, if you think back, you realize why this is important. The reason this is important is because playing cards or gambling gives you a better understanding of probability. That's why we see this difference. Okay. So I've given this choice. I've given this talk all over the world, and so this is what I use to break from one paper to the next. So I just wanted to show people what my wife's choice problem is. And so I use this everywhere actually, and at this point I usually tell them that the script that you see here is Odia, and these are all desserts from my part of the world. Okay, and that last one is obviously my favorite. So let me now move into group decision making. So many decisions from the family dinner table to the corporate boardroom involve groups. Okay, but the motivation here was that insurance plans or decisions about insurance in many cases are made both by husband and wife together for the family. In some cases, maybe the wife makes it. In some cases, the husband makes it. So the question is, if we have this kind of setting, which situation is better? Okay, do groups make better decisions than individuals? In other words, are 2 heads better than 1? Because the literature on this is not clear whether groups can always make better decisions than others. So what does a group do? A group brings different skills and perspectives, right? So you can get different ideas, but the performance of the group will depend on how much effort people put into this decision making, and also what is the nature of the collaborative process? How do people work together? If some people don't work well together in a team, that team is not going to accomplish much. Okay, so the other thing that will happen is when you put people in a group, there might be a tendency to free ride, right? So given that there are other 3 people in the group, you might say, okay, I'm not going to put in as much effort as the other people are putting in, let them take care of the job. So our goal in this experiment was to disentangle these effects and see who makes better decisions, okay? So there's a free riding incentive, there's a social responsibility because you are now responsible for the well-being of another person. And of course, according to the communication in the psychology literature, organizational behavior literature, there's a lot of work on this. Since groups can communicate, exchange of ideas happens, but the effect of that is generally in the literature is ambiguous. So in the experiment, we had individuals. So these are people sitting alone, college students. This experiment was done with college students. So they sit alone on a computer terminal and make the same kind of decision that I showed you. On the other hand, we could also have what we call collaborative groups. So we bring 3 people into a room. They each read the instructions independently, finish reading the instructions, they discuss how to solve the problem, and they solve the problem. Okay. Then we had something called non-collaborative groups. What's the idea of a non-collaborative group? In the non-collaborative group, 3 people come, they sit in the computer on their own individual computers. They make their own choices, but they are told, look, whatever choice you make will be imposed on the other members of your group. And how will we decide whose decision? We will randomly pick one of the 3 of you. So please read carefully, understand what you have to do, make a decision. At the end of after all 3 of you have made a decision, we will randomly pick one person from the 3 of you and impose their payoffs on everybody else as the outcome for the entire group. So here, now you have to worry because your decision is going to affect the well-being of the other. So in this case, let's say this is the person who is selected. These 3 people are in a group. They make their own individual decision, but this person's decision determines what will happen to the entire group. This is called a non-collaborative group. Okay. The tasks are very simple. In this case, this was a paper and pen experiment. So they look at a choice task like this, make decisions, and they got $20 for the correct performance, $5 for participation, and we only paid them for one task. So if they took part in 8 different tasks, we will randomly select one task and pay them $20 if they got that task correct. That way you have an incentive to make sure that you do all the decisions correctly, okay? So there is a significant difference between the collaborative group and the other 2. Now, on easy tasks, that is, let's say 4x4 or 4x4 tasks, there is no difference between individuals and collaborative groups, okay? Whether it's a whether it is a non-collaborative or a collaborative, okay? So, this type of collaborative or the actual collaborative group, it does not matter. There is no difference between individuals and the 2 types of collaborative groups. However, on hard tasks, non-collaborative groups do much worse, okay? So the overall ranking is that collaborative groups where people can discuss, talk, choose the answer, that's the best. This is the individuals, and then is the non-collaborative group where you individually make the decision, but one of you is randomly chosen and their decision is implemented for everybody. Okay, this is the worst performing group. So if I plot the results, I will explain in a minute what we think is going on, but here I want you to pay attention to the green and the black line. So here is a counterfactual experiment or a synthetic experiment we did. What we did is we took the individuals and we combined the individuals into groups artificially, okay? So suppose I had 30 individuals in the experiment, then how many groups would be possible? I would have 30 C3 possible groups. And then from each of those groups, I pick the best performer, okay? I find out that a collaborative group is as good as the best performer of these hypothetical groups, okay? So the green line is the hypothetical or the synthetic group, the black line is the collaborative group. So what this allows me to, so from this, here are the conclusions. Collaborative groups outperform individuals and non-collaborative groups. Collaborative groups do as well as their best performer. In other words, remember what we said. We have these synthetic groups from which we take the best performer. It turns out that best performer is as good as a collaborative group. So in other words, and since we videotaped the collaborative groups in work, we also know this because we saw this in the experiment. What happens is when people go into a room to make a decision, they discuss among each other. Then they realize who is the best in the entire group for making this decision. After that, they assign this person to make the decision. Let us also keep in mind that this type of observation, where the collaborative group is as good as its best member, is true only when we have quantitative or mathematical tasks. It could be very different if I am going to try and design a bridge, or if I am trying to design a building or interior decoration. There, this type of performance may not be true. In a quantitative task, the collaborative group is as good as its best performer. the other thing we find is, why are the non-collaborative groups the worst? Especially in the hard tasks, this difference comes about because the hard task is cognitively challenging for the brain. So these non-collaborative groups, what happens is everyone says, okay, there is 1/3 probability that I am going to be the person that is going to be chosen for the decision to be implemented. So when the task is very hard, people just make a random guess because they think they are not going to be chosen, or there is low probability that they will be chosen. Therefore, in other words, we can say that the free riding incentive outweighs the social responsibility incentive because it's random choice. Okay? Therefore, they do worse than both collaborative groups and individuals. That's what we learn from this experiment. And so at this point, I would move to the next talk, which would have been about designing choice architectures. I'm not going to do that. That's based on the work of Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein and the book Nudge. So this would be about how to help people make better choices without having fewer choices. And Mithali already did an excellent introduction. The Zoom site is here if you want to do. And so with that, I want to stop and give people a chance to ask questions.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Sarangi. In fact, I was thinking this is as a classroom teaching only. Why? Because I think for many of us, the behavioral and experimental economics is new. Okay? And that's why, of course, for some time I was reading actually some part of the behavioral economics literature. So I could actually definitely follow some things. In fact, we have already one person who is raising hand. Dr. Jyoti Satpathy, he has already posted a question, but I think I will, please unmute and ask question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think he is unmuting. He is unmuting. Dr. Satpathy, you have to unmute and speak.
But somebody's muting it. Okay. Very, very, very important talk for the 21st century, Dr. Sarangi, because this neuroeconomics, behavioral economics is the order of the day. Dr. Sarangi, one thing I usually ponder around is the choice overload, or the information overload that really leads to a state of decision susceptibility, and we are at a loss to home on to a decision, or even an optimal decision or a near optimal decision. So the brain has a limited capacity to absorb information, events, data, etc. So in that sense, how do we follow a process of iteration so that we ward off the unwanted information and straight away, like a spearhead, home onto our decision matrix?
Okay, so there is obviously, there is no simple answer to this question. This is a very difficult question. If you knew the answer. But so in the design of the choice architecture, we do suggest one strategy. So suppose you are going to buy shoes, or you are going with your wife to buy shoes. Maybe you like shoes. Okay, doesn't matter. One of you is going to buy shoes. Okay, so then in the end, you see 16 pairs of shoes. The strategy we suggest, which leads to best choices, at least in the experimental setup, is have a tournament. Okay, so break up the problem into smaller parts. Solve each problem, find the optimal solution of each small part of the problem. In the end, have a tournament of the optimal solutions. Okay, so suppose I had 16 pairs of shoes, I would break them up into groups of 4 shoes. From each pair of 4, I would choose the best option. From each set of 4, choose the best option, and then in the end, choose from among the best 4 options. So that's one of the strategies we suggest for making better choices. The other option, of course, maybe somebody who is an expert on shoes. So hire an expert, right? So that's another solution. If you have difficulty making a choice, you find an expert, let the expert advise you.
Yeah, very true. But as far as the cognitive portions that you had mentioned in your speech, I think this interpretation is quite classical in nature. We need to, dovetail this eye tracking and other stuff into our decision-making process to bring about a scientific approach towards decision-making, right?
Yeah, so there are people who are looking at eye tracking issues and so on. That's a whole different ballgame.
Right.
because you need access to eye tracking equipment. It is very costly on top of that to do these things. Training. I mean, I agree with you that eye tracking will help. I mean, Amazon already does this, right? Because they wonder about where to place the price information, where to place the comparison information, where to place the discount information. So all the big companies that have a web presence are doing this all the time. So this is already true.
All right. Thank you.
Right? And
thank you, Dr. Sarangi. Thank you. Over to the audience, please. Thank you very much.
There are two more questions that is already in the chat window. One is that how do you judge between the right and wrong choice? Is it not subjective? And
yes.
then,
and let me answer that one. So I kind of tried to answer, right? So it is true that if I am talking about what I want to eat in a restaurant, this is subjective, right? Somebody might like chena poda, somebody might like chena jhilli. Okay, so these are subjective decisions, and I can understand that. So the choice set, depending on what it contains, can matter. And there is a lot of studies on that. That's about satisfaction and happiness. And there are some experiments, actually somebody has done more recently on trying to even understand the subjective type of parameters. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to create optimal choice, right? So this is optimal for everybody. But there is nothing that prevents you from looking at subjective. You can take an object and break it up into its attributes. You can rank the attributes and then let people make similar types of choices. I mean, I don't have time to go into a detailed answer, but if you go to University of Maryland and look at some work by Erkut Özbey is doing some work. Erkut and his wife, I think Emil Özbey and Erkut Özbey are doing some work on things like this. Lancaster's old idea in the 1960s of creating utility on characteristic space already is an idea like this. Next question, Amarendra.
but I would have a question. The question is that how do the prior information influence this decision making? And see, one individual would have some prior information, but when you have a lot of choices, and again you are going from one individual to a group decision, then you get extra information from other people. So in that context, how somebody actually takes a decision?
So it's a very good question, which is why, if you realize in the experiment, this is one of the reasons, as Vernon Smith argued, that in an experiment, do not use context, because people will have prior information, right? So get rid of the context. Otherwise, the prior information might affect the experimental outcome and you will not be able to study it. So now coming back to a real life problem. So you're saying, okay, so you told me what you found in the lab. Now, what does it mean for the real world? Because in the real world, different people will have access to different amounts of information. So now that, of course, I cannot give you a precise answer because now you're going outside the experiment. The experiment basically says that more choices are bad for people over 60 unless they have higher education. Right? That's basically the outcome. And groups in these types of tasks are as good as their best member. So in the real world, how do you make a decision? If you have prior information, it depends. So remember, as I was saying, you have prior information. The question is, do you know whether your prior information is good or bad? That is another issue, right? So you may have read wrong information and you may end up making completely wrong decisions. So I think the important thing, at the end of the day, I think thing that matters is education, having the right type of knowledge and having the understanding whether you have the right type of knowledge or not. Because if you don't have the right type of knowledge, you ask an expert to help you make the decision. That's why we are all in the business of specialization. That's why we are all economists.
I was going to add that.
Babu, who's a doctor, so.
I said I was going to add.
Okay, I'm going
to add to your answer that Smith and Oman, that the Smith was always talking about the beauty contest in a finite repetition, and Oman thought of infinite repetition, and that's what made a big difference. So you have to decide.
Yeah.
So you have to decide whether it's a finite repetition or infinite repetition. That makes a big difference. I'm answering Amarendra's question, I was saying. So that's a very good question, but that's it.
I mean, the repetition. So there's also the issue of learning, right? So with the repetition, there is also the issue of learning. In the beauty context, of course, there's the issue of, what, not just what you're doing, but also what other people are doing, right? Because the beauty contest is not a decision-making problem; it's a game. So,
but even in Oman's model, in the first part, there is no learning, but it's just what you think. It thinks that I think, X thinks that I think the right things.
Yeah,
so learning, of course, makes it far more complex. Learning will make it far more complex and far more fascinating, far more practical. So that's where, to answer Amanda's question, that it depends. Are you talking about, small repeated games, finitely repeated games, infinitely repeated games that will make all the difference. That make a lot of difference.
There is a question from Professor Udashankar Misra. I was wondering whether you can make a choice with personal bias and outcome. Then optimal is not effectively optimal. Then how do you determine optimal choice?
So, yes, as we said, if it's a subjective, this goes back to the first question. If something is subjective, then that's your optimal. Okay. If each individual is going to define their own, to put it clearly, their own maximization problem and their own constraints, then they have to maximize within their decision problem, right? The decision problem says what? There is a set of alternatives from which you have to choose, and there is a set of constraints. You must choose the optimal given your constraints. So in other words, if you are going to decide what is optimal for you within your constraints, you have to make that decision. So that may be different from one person to another. Remember, in the experiment, this was not the case. Okay. So even in the real world, suppose we're talking about choosing the best dish. Somebody might like, kebab, and somebody else might like, I don't know, dahi khata. So the issue is, given your choices, do you understand the decision? The focus here is in the choice process. How are you reasoning through the problem? Do you understand what is going on? Okay. And how do you make the decisions? I mean, of course, it's entirely possible that different people have different tastes. That is not being said here. Nor is that being precluded.
Okay. Let me give you another real life example, the choice case, and then you have to answer that. See, when now all government employees in India are accepting new pension scheme. Now, when you opt for the new pension scheme, there is an option that in what all portfolios would you like to put that money, and no one knows actually what is all about that, actually how much return you get from all that, and we just put tick mark. And mostly it happens so that some government, some clerk or some of our friends advises, so you just put SBI and all that actually. So how do is it an optimal choice at all? We do not have prior information. Even the advisor who is advising us also doesn't have the clear information. So is this optimal, and how to define optimal decision here?
Well, I think in this case, the optimal decision is more is better, no? In case of money, I think we all agree. Or in the case of retirement plan, I think we will all agree that more is better. Right? So optimal plans. Well, what did Pharma French tell us? Pharma French already talked about the efficient market hypothesis. And the efficient market hypothesis basically says, well, you cannot exploit the stock market. You should just go for index funds. I mean, it's the same problem I face. I also don't know the answer. Okay. So at least according to economic theory and finance, you just go for index funds. That's it. That's the best you can do. You cannot beat the stock market on average.
Thank you, Professor Sarangi. Actually, I was very excited to hear your lecture. My question was about optimality, and I was reminded of something which I want to share with this crowd here, and it relates to your lecture also. Once I was teaching distribution in the class, and I gave an example of winning a lottery. Because lottery tickets are umpteen choices you have. But what you actually make it reduce down to is a number preference, ultimately. And if you have a number preference in the sense which number is lucky for you, that is what every person has a subjective choice of a number. Now, if you apply your entire thesis that you are actually trying to sell, and I mean, I'm just giving a context to that how do you actually say that which choice or which number choice, it may be your preference, it may be God-given, it may be astrologer told, but you will make so that you will win a lottery. How do you make application of this?
Right. So essentially what you are telling me is you have a decision heuristic which says rank, I give you a set of numbers and then I rank them according to luckiness I have in my own head, right? So you just made up a new decision heuristic, right? So just like tallying and just like expected utility maximization, you just made up a lucky number heuristic. Let's call it the lucky number heuristic. I take a set of numbers, I rank them according to whichever, or you can say it's a variation of the lexicographic heuristic.
Yes.
I rank them and then I look at the lottery tickets and I say, okay, this is the one that seems to be matching my heuristic best. I will go for that. It doesn't mean that you will win. As we saw in the elderly people,
Yes.
they chose to use the tallying heuristic and walk into a trap and make a suboptimal choice. So what I'm saying is, if there is, first of all, anyway, lottery ticket, there is no chance. As economists, we don't buy lottery tickets. The deck is always stacked against us, right? In the long run, you will never win in the lottery ticket. So I think the probability of winning the lottery ticket is even lower than dying in a car accident. Just to put it in perspective. So, you know, that's a different game. But so again, these are things people make up. See, when the decision environment is very complex, people will come up with strategies, and this is one way to deal with a complex decision environment. It might work sometimes, but you know, in general, it will not work. So that's basically how I would think about what you've just told. It's a new heuristic.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, there are still a couple more questions. How do we do? Are you going to answer them?
I can't see. If I see the screen, I don't see the questions. So
in the chat window, there are questions. Are you able to see the chat window?
Let me see. Oh, yeah. Okay, let me see. I'm opening the chat window now. Yeah. You have to decide when you want to stop. Can I have good questions?
Yeah, you can take maybe 2 more questions.
So you pick. There is too much choice. So you are the expert.
Okay. So let us take one more question from Dr. Sudipta Misra. In a group decision making, how to ensure collective responsibility?
Okay, so this is a different problem. You're asking about a design problem, right? So you are asking about how do we assign group responsibility so that every person will in the group will perform according. So that free riding, you have to avoid free riding. So I will tell you a scheme that I use in my game theory class where I give a group project. Okay, it works reasonably well. So what I do is I tell them the group project has 2 parts. There is a paper you have to write, and there is a presentation. So in the presentation, I will grade everybody in the group equally. Whatever you present in the class, I don't care who presents it. 1 person out of you, or 3 or 2, I don't care. But I will give the same grade to the entire group. However, you will also turn in an individually written paper. And that individually written paper will be graded individually. Okay. So that allows me to figure out who actually knows the subject in that group. So if you want group effort, I think the group compensation scheme has to take this kind of idea into account, that there is a common compensation baseline, let's say, and then on top of that, you also have individual compensation based on effort. Yeah. So, I mean, this is a general mechanism design problem, right? How do you ensure that a group achieves its target? This is more generally a mechanism design problem. And how would you come up with the correct incentive compatibility and individual rationality constraints to ensure that the group will deliver what it is supposed to deliver?
Okay, I think a related question is that collaborative decision is better, but there is possibility of moral hazard. How the moral hazard influence the decision?
So as we saw, definitely there was moral hazard, right? So it's a very good question, and this is exactly what we wanted to get to. That some people, we have all been on teams as students or as employees, we have all been on group projects where somebody in the group will not do their part. Maybe it was you who did not do your part. I mean, I'm not going to make judgment, but there is always free rider in group. So moral hazard problem is always there in any kind of collective decision problem. There is always the effort problem, collective effort task. There is always the possibility of moral hazard, and there is just no way to get around it unless we design, as I mentioned, compensation schemes that will target the specific moral hazard. So a very good example is what Grameen Bank does, right? The joint liability scheme. What happens in the joint liability scheme? You get a loan, but you only get the loan in a group. So both of you are liable. So if both of you get, say the two people go, they get a loan, they are liable for 10,000 rupees. Each loan is 10,000, but everyone is liable for 20,000, right? Then what happens is, if the other person tries to engage in moral hazard, you go to their house and sit on their neck and say, do your work, otherwise I have to pay your loan. So the other way to get around the moral hazard problem in a group is to ensure that there is a collective punishment for everybody. Otherwise, there is just absolutely no way to solve this.
Okay, so the last question or comment probably is, there is always a trade-off between decision-making process and time.
Agreed. There is, I mean, that is one of the things I've also argued in my book, that cognitive costs are important. Cognitive costs are important. I mean, that's in fact the starting point of this talk, right? That remember the Sudafed picture. The Sudafed picture. One Sudafed may be not very good, or even the menu. That's the whole idea, right? Maybe if you don't have a choice, it's not very good. On the other hand, if the choice is so big that it will take you the entire night to process the choice, that's also not very good. So I think as human beings, we are happy to have limited choice, given that, psychology has already said, I mean, so there's the classic paper by Miller in 1952 or 53, which says that at any given point in time, the brain can process 7 bits of information. So information processing is costly. So given that, obviously, a long menu of choices is not a good idea. And that's what we strive to show that. But more importantly, the other thing we also realize that there is huge cognitive cost with age. So there is cognitive ability decline with age, and the cognitive cost goes up with age. So therefore, in general, the idea is that cognitive costs matter, and so we can't have all the choices we want. Yeah. So this is absolutely a recognition.
I think we should stop here. And now again, the question would arise whether the choice of questions that I made was an optimal choice, because there are a couple of questions I have skipped. So whether this choice was optimal or not, that question will arise, and we'll see after that. So I think with this we'll stop. And before I invite the Assistant Secretary of Orissa Economic Association, Dr. Manoj Kumar Das, let me again give you some more information about this lecture. This lecture started in the year 2009, and the first lecture was given by Professor Pulin Naik. The second one was given by Dr. Deepak Kumar Mahanti, Executive Director, RBI. The third one by Professor Manoj Panda. Fourth one by Professor Prabhat Patnaik. And last year's lecture was given by Professor Deepak Kumar Misra. And previous to that, it was Professor Keshav Das who had delivered the lecture. So, yeah, with this, I will now hand over the floor to Dr. Manoj Kumar Das, Assistant Secretary of Orissa Economic Association, to offer vote of thanks. Dr. Manoj Kumar Das.
Namaskar to all. Actually, I am feeling very happy and privileged to offer a formal vote of thanks. At the very outset, on behalf of the Odisha Economics Association, we offer thanks and express our gratitude to the family member of Professor Baidyanath Misra, and especially his two sons, those who are present over here, Dr. D.K. Misra and Jayant Misra. We can say worthy sons of a worthy father. Professor Baidyanath Misra, as we all know, was a towering personality and a teacher of par excellence in economics. He earned many laurels to his credits. In his 100th birthday, the today's lecture delivered by Professor Sudipta Sarangi is simply outstanding, par excellence. The topic, are more choices better, and other tales about decision making, chosen by Professor Sarangi, illuminated us, educated us, and really entertained us. So my take from his lecture is, let's collaborate and communicate. So here I am sure that the choice of having Professor Sarangi for this lecture is a choice of fully satisfying and fully optimal. So thank you, Professor Sarangi, for delivering a nice lecture. I also express thanks and gratitude to the President of the Association, Professor Bhavesh Sen sir. Secretary of the Association, Dr. Amarendra Das, for nicely organizing and coordinating this lecture. We also express sincere thanks to the past presidents of the association present over here on this platform. Thanks to all EC members and members of the association for making this event a success. Thanks to all the participants. Thank you all once again.
Okay, thank you, Manoj. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So,
thank you very much.
So with this, we shall conclude. And good day, Sudipta bhai, and good night to all of you in India.
Thank you. Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you, Amarendra. Namaskar.